Roughly once a year, the Dead by Daylight community brings up their personal qualms and comments regarding a definitively controversial playstyle known as slugging, because killers leave people on the ground like little gastropods, and the killers have zero intention of picking people up from the very start of the game. This doesn't include incidental slugging, where killers might want to chase off somebody hovering for a flashlight save, a sabotage play, or to avoid triggering deliverance in the endgame. I'm talking specifically about clear intent to never pick people up until all four are on the floor, with no chance picking themselves up or until the game ends. I've even seen some players intentionally target survivors that have less time on their 4-minute bleed-out bars to bleed them out quicker, just to show how depraved the strategy can be. But to make my stance on this playstyle crystal clear, I find it exceedingly boring because it removes a lot of the interactivity and nuance of playing Dead by Daylight. What I find fun about DBD is making game-to-game adjustments based on whom I'm playing against, and then trying to adjust to their perks as necessary. Since the game is also designed around putting survivors on a hook, there are some really fun perk options that interact with hooking specifically that also require informed counterplay. For example, if you know that the killer has the perk Friends Till the End, then you should slide into a locker to avoid it. If a survivor has Dead Hard, you just have to be a bit more patient with your next hit. It's like I have said before, DBD is a game of checks and balances, and both sides have the capability to shift those checks and balances in their favor based on a variety of knowledge checks. So when the killer decides to leave everybody on the ground, they forego the complex and intricate base game design by eliminating components of counterplay on either side. It can be fun for the killer because trying to keep track of all of your slugs is an interesting thought experiment. But when a survivor gets picked up from the ground, they don't give the killer a loud noise notification indicating their position like someone getting rescued from a hook. Regardless, it is so incredibly boring to have little to no agency or urgency in the game on the survivor side. If you're knocked down early in the match, you just have to sit there and twiddle your thumbs for 4 minutes until everyone receives the same treatment, because the game has been designed in such a way that this is the more consistent way for killers to win the game now. In a manner of speaking, getting hooked feels like the sort of final closing action for getting chased that lets your team get actively involved. You've failed the chase, you got put on a hook, and now your team has 70 seconds to decide whether they can collectively bring you back into the game or not. Slugging is so much more separated and individualistic, which isn't in the spirit of DBD at all. Getting slugged instead gives the impression that the chase has been delayed indefinitely until somebody else picks you up. The difference, of course, being that you don't get the same protections that you would upon being unhooked, making the game mechanically similar to when Base Get Borrowed Time didn't exist and you could get camped and killed immediately off of hook. As a survivor, you were equally at the whim of what your loadout is, because if you don't have an anti-slugging build or your team isn't running healing perks or made for this, then you're just straight out of luck. Sorry, buddy, you should have guessed that you were going to face the DBD equivalent of the London system. Just no interaction whatsoever. Here's the thing, though. In 164 games of Survivor, which I played between February to the end of May this year, I faced a full slugging killer maybe once to my memory. It was a TikToker playing nurse on Family Residence, so it was the kind of hell spawn that you only get once every 150 or so matches, and I do tend to play on the NA West servers, so maybe that has something to do with it. Either way, even with the publicity that the playstyle has received through videos or mutual streamers dedicating their entire games to it, it still seems like an exception to the way that people normally play still, and not the rule. It is pretty annoying to play against, and much like a bad customer at a retail job, that confirmation bias combined with an upset to the usual practice rhythm of Dead by Daylight will have you believe that it's a more frequent occurrence than it actually is. It still sucks, though, and it makes you not want to play afterwards. That all being said, simply by the virtue of ignoring hooks altogether, the killer oversteps their ability to manipulate the fundamentals of the game without using their power. Getting shot through a crack the size of a walnut by the Deathslinger breaks the way that chase is supposed to be played, but that's how the power works and is therefore a component of counterplay that the killer offers. Smacking somebody twice and then just leaving them to rot, with the exception of powers that encourage that kind of play like Twins and Oni, you can do that on any character. Who cares? That's not an intended use of the fundamental game mechanic, and something that Behavior tried to stamp out poorly during the infamous Sinister Grace PTB. And for good reason, too, even if their implementations were in the wrong direction. Now, the reason why Killer Slug is because they specifically hate you on a personal level, and they laugh and clap their hands with glee when they inflict pain and suffering on others, so you're justified in hurling racial and queerphobic slurs at them because you're allowed to use words that are just as awful as they are. I mean, only awful people play Killer, isn't that right, guys? No, you dumbass, it's because they want to win the game. I guarantee you that most killers do not care about you in the slightest and only care about the result. Like most people in PvP games, killers just want to win, which seems to be a strangely foreign concept to DBD players. You guys do know that other communities laugh at us for our stupid made-up rules, right? Anyway, people like winning games, and Slugging is unfortunately really good at that, despite the hand-wringing. When the killer chooses to not hook a survivor, they deny the activation of several extremely impactful perks. Without picking the survivor up, they deny flashlight, pallet, and sabotage saves, all of which would otherwise interrupt the killer's ability to, well, kill people, but it gives interactivity to the survivor side that the killer still has to play around. And then the pallet density change also adds fewer incentives for killer players to pick survivors up, either because there are more threats of a pallet save, or because the killer has incidentally wasted so much time breaking and playing around pallets now that they can no longer spare the time that it takes to pick up a survivor. It takes 3 seconds to pick them up, a few seconds to slowly lumber over to a hook, and then a few more to go through the hooking animation, which takes another 3. And during that time, the killer is entirely incapable of taking any actions while they're transporting the survivor, so that gives everyone else completely free reign to do whatever they want. It is much simpler and quicker to simply knock the survivor down and save several seconds per match by leaving them in the dirt every time, while also avoiding the activation of several strong perks. Oh, and we can't forget the other basic changes that specifically benefit survivors, increasing hook timers and the off-hook protection's duration. Making both of those timers longer didn't really solve any problems with the killer role. Low-tier killers are punished easier, while top-tier killers really don't care because they're top-tier. 15 seconds of haste and endurance, especially in the endgame, doesn't mean shit to the Blight, who can 2-tap you in fewer than 6 seconds anyway, but it does mean a lot to the mid-tier to low-tier characters. 70-second timers can't really exist against a decent nurse player, because their ability to immediately create pressure necessitates a quick response from the survivors, unless they want everyone to get hooked. But that timer does exist for lower tier characters who might have to gamble on being able to defend a hook stage or generator to maintain what little pressure they can exert. But if you stand too close, the survivor can then unhook themselves, and the range is pretty generous. And heck, anti-camp is disallowed in every comp setting that I know of, which really makes you think about how well received it was. I do jest a little, because getting your toes sniffed by a face-camping Bubba was extremely annoying and left a little agency in the game for some people, but I think that people that want to face-camp will still face-camp anyway, and that the system has disproportionately affected low-tier killers that have to defend in proximal areas. For high-mobility killers, this doesn't matter because they can zip back to the hook almost instantly anyway, but low-mobility killers that recognize that they've hooked somebody in the middle of a 3-gen aren't allowed to stick around the area that they've clearly set up for themselves to defend, lest they get punished for it. Or, you know, they could just slug the survivors from the start and ignore those headaches that have been increased incrementally over the last 3 years. So when you see a killer preferring to slug instead of hook with all of this in mind, it's almost a no-brainer choice, right? To further drive the point home that slugging is pretty much the best strategy that killers can employ presently, here's a list of everything that slugging ignores, denies, or outright lessens the use of in some way. When survivors aren't hooked, they get 0 activations out of Babysitter, Blood Rush, Borrow Time, Breakdown, Camaraderie, Come and Get Me, Dead Hard, Deliverance, Fast Track, Kindred, Off the Record, Resurgence, Second Wind, Self-Preservation, Shoulder the Burden, Slippery Meat, Up the Ante, Will Make It Wicked, and of course, the big Will to Live, or Decisive Strike as it used to be known. When survivors aren't picked up, they are denied pallet saves, sabotage saves, and flashlight saves, alongside the activations of Background Player, Boil Over, Breakout, Flip-Flop, Win-A-Vault saves with Last Stand, Power Struggle, and Saboteur. And even though hooking-related effects aren't their main components, there are some perks that lose a portion of their capabilities, like the unhook speeds from Leader or No One Left Behind. And even if we include the save use case scenarios of flashlights and blinding effects, slugging also counters the main reason why people bring Champion of Light, Flashbang, and Residual Manifest. In total, that is 32 perks that slugging ignores or invalidates in some way. The killer doesn't have to go through the usual counterplay of finding other survivors hovering for saves nearby, or learning the simple act of facing a wall, which is a very basic concept that everyone should learn to implement at some point when they choose to slug constantly. Now, obviously, some of these perks are already pretty useless, and it sucks that the best way to play Killer, as a response to the crushing pressure of every other aforementioned change, is a method that makes these perks worse. You can't run the usual rigmarole of chase perks out of fear of running into a killer who will slug, and the otherwise strong perks get invalidated completely anyway. And so the options for survivors who also want to win gradually get coerced into mundane healing perk combos or gen rush combos to hopefully complete the game before the killer can knock everyone else down. As you can understand, the response is born out of a frustrated response from the killers who have simply given up trying to win the game as it's designed because of the sweeping base kit changes. Instead of being rewarded for hooking the survivors, it actually makes the game significantly harder for the killer to play. Survivors are then forced to counter these gameplay choices with what I feel is an exceedingly boring perk meta. I find slugging to be a paradoxical playstyle because the killers obviously want to win, but they feel coerced to do so in a way that isn't like playing Dead by Daylight at all, with all of its otherwise fun quirks, creativity, and nuance. It's like playing games of chess, and DBD gamers hate chess. So what do we do about this? Well, my suggestion for reducing slugging incentives would be to revert the off-hook endurance duration to 10 seconds and the hook timers to 60. Make hooks actually mean something. And for the love of all things holy behavior, you guys implemented the diminishing return system almost 2 months ago. Where are the perk changes to help revive perk and play variety? Do we need to stare at footage of another cabin for 13 hours for those too? When will this madness ever end? And that's the end of the video. I wanted to give you fellas a little life update because I thought I wasn't going to be able to upload anything for a few months at least, but hey, we got something out. As I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, I did not do much editing on this video though, and that's because I'm kind of in between homes right now. I got one monitor set up and working to get this video out. My internet connection sucks, and I have very limited time to work on this stuff. I'm even writing the first draft of my scripts out by hand because my PC is relatively inaccessible right now, but I'm doing what I can to keep poking away at YouTube stuff because I just love making videos so much. So thanks for your patience with me. I'll try to be back as soon as I can, but I have literally no idea when that will be next. Until the next one, safe travels, and goodbye.